yeah, so then the first season ended and we're back. One day, my mom sat me down and she told me that, she said, my dear son, you have all these wonderful ideas, but I pray to God that you stop just thinking and talking and you actually make something happen. We're constantly being bombarded with a lot of information. So we have a lot of information coming to our ends. Now, this information is a blessing in the way that it makes us infinitely more intelligent than those who came before us. We want to show our core audience, who are people who are basically teenagers and people who are just entering their 20s, that, you know what, success isn't that far from you.
We are back for season 2. You're most welcome. I am Kavera Angel and I'll be your host. I was your host on season 1. And today, our very first guest for this marathon is Jason Sentomero, the founder of Made in Uganda. He is a student at Strathmore University, a CEO, a young entrepreneur, someone who inspires me, and challenges me as my age mate. So I hope you're all as excited as I am to have him today. Jason, how are you doing?
Very fine, thank you, Angel. I am very humbled by your introduction. I didn't know I inspired you.
High key, you do. And that brings me to Made in Uganda.
I think the best word to describe that is hope. We started Made in Uganda in July, early July. I had just finished my senior 6 at King's College Budo, and we entered into a lockdown after we finished our exams. So the country was put on lockdown a few days into our vacation. So the senior 5s, the non-candidate classes, had been in lockdown for about a year. They had just gotten back to school and they were in school for a month and they were sent back immediately. So we started Made in Uganda to be, that pillar of hope when there's a lot of bad news going around. Hope, why? Because I noticed among my peers that a lot of us had lost hope in Uganda. We had literally left the country to the dogs. Because, man, it's been a year into the pandemic. The education system seems not to have any plan. We live in a country that's stifled with corruption. We have a lot of corruption in the country. And people are like, how do you make it in Uganda? The only way to make it is by going into government and being corrupt, by starting some business somewhere with a little bit of corruption in it, or by leaving the country and running away. So I wanted to give hope to these peers so that they may stay in Uganda, and not only just stay in Uganda, but realize that they have an active role to play in the building of the country. So how do we do this? We go and look for signs of hope. And for someone to have hope, you need to give them an experience of things being good. So we look for successful Ugandan stories, because it would always baffle me that whenever I look for inspiration on YouTube, I land on Tony Robbins in the US. I land on people who are mostly from Western civilization, and then local stories are not that much shared. Not a lot of people get to hear from our local stories. So we start the hunt for these local stories, because if someone sees a Ugandan who has made it here in Uganda, they may hopefully stay. So we look for these pillars of hope. And like 2 weeks before, I was working with one of my partners at Create at Village Mall, Hakim, and we ran into Mr. Amos Wekesa. He had entered Village Mall. He went to the bookstore. He was buying pencils for one of his children. So we ran into him and we had a conversation with him, and I'm like, okay, I from that interaction, I'm able to get his contact. So I reach out to him when we want to start to sell hope, and I explained to him the vision from Made in Uganda, and he says he'd like to be part of it, but he only speaks for a fee. So we handle the logistics of that, and we get started with Mr. Amos Wekesa as our first guest on Made in Uganda. and he shared a lot of knowledge. So that's how we got started in the momentum. After him, we had three other guests, and the response was good. The response from my peers was really, really good. Yeah, so then the first season ended, and we're back for season 2.
Yes, we are back, bigger and better than ever. Yeah, so in our first season, we had, Amos Wekesa, Sabrina Chitaka. They're Ugandans, but in that age bracket, I wouldn't want to call them old. But here, for this second season, we are looking at the youth, people who are under the age of 30. I won't spoil for the audience. But how did we get here? Why are we now looking out for the youth?
So I'm really, really, really excited for season 2, because here we're going to be looking at, the younger generation, the youth, people who are closer to our age bracket. And still in the spirit of selling hope, we want to show our core audience, who are people who are basically teenagers and people who are just entering their 20s, that, success isn't that far from you. And we're not saying that the people that we're going to be hosting are very, very extremely successful. We're just saying that they've been able to start their journey. And the fact that they've been able to start their journey amidst COVID, amidst everything that has happened to us, means that they have something of value to share to us.
From working with you and from listening to you, I see you're very invested in the youth. Some people are going for the older age bracket because these are the people with the money, Some people are going for the middle age bracket because they're the ones who have already developed the skill. So why do you think that the future is in the hands of the youth?
Why I think the future is in the hands of the youth is, I can summarize it in this way. To whom much is given, much is expected. We're constantly being bombarded with a lot of information. So we have a lot of information coming to our ends. Now, this information is a blessing in the way that it makes us infinitely more intelligent than those who came before us. Intelligent in a sense that we know more, and we can easily know more. For someone to get information way back then, it had to be an experience that Jaja had and pass on that knowledge to you. If Jaja didn't have that experience, if Jaja never cut anyone's body as a surgeon, you wouldn't necessarily know how to do that. If Jaja never practiced law, you wouldn't know how to do that. So we have access to this information, and that in itself is a blessing. So to whom much is given, much is expected. The second way of viewing it is from the point of problems. Africa is currently the frontier for the next level of development. And we have a lot of problems to solve here. I don't know if you can choose to look at it as a curse, but from my point of view, I'm choosing to look at it as a blessing. We have so many problems, and this gives us a chance to solve them. Now, it is our role as the youth to solve these problems, using that a lot of information that we have. So we have much information, and we have a lot of problems to solve. So using the two, we're able to come up with solutions that we owe to ourselves to solve. The problems 50 years from now that could have been solved today, issues like climate change, are going to affect us more than the people in power, simply because we're going to be the ones alive to experience these problems. So that is why I believe that we, the youth, are the future. We are the ones who are supposed to use this infinite knowledge, this infinite access to information that we have, and we start to take apart these problems so that we can build our future. That is why I believe we are the future.
My main question for Jason is that I've had a vision of Made in Uganda, but what inspired Made in Uganda? Like, what inspired its foundation? I don't know if he mentioned it earlier, given the fact that I have joined 17 minutes to the discussion, but I would like to ask him what inspired him to begin Made in Uganda.
One day, my mom sat me down and she told me that she said, "My dear son, you have all these wonderful ideas, but I pray to God that you stop just thinking and talking and you actually make something happen." So that shifted my mind from, just coming up with solutions cognitively to finding a way to implement these solutions, which is a whole other devil. Implementation or execution is a whole other thing to deal with. I just started reading this amazing book by Angela Duckworth called Grit. And for you to see that thing through, you need two things. You need to have passion for what you're doing, meaning you really need to love what you're doing. But more importantly, you need to have perseverance. You need to be able to continuously do that, to continuously iterate, continuously repeat what you're doing. So, and the only way you can continuously do that is through having passion. So I'm not going to say that I've mastered the art. What I've been able to do is to, most of the things that I start, I have partners, because I know I've studied myself and I know how my mind can jump from one thing to another. So I have a partner in most of the things that I deal with. Now, this partner, in most cases, is someone who really wants to take a career path in that specific industry. So they help me stay grounded. They help me limit my thoughts to how we can build that particular thing. And they also hold me accountable. You get, so they keep on holding us accountable. They keep on telling us that, you know what, you need to do this. You need to have an accountability partner to keep your discipline going. My partners, Angel is always holding me accountable. The Made in Uganda team, when we went silent as we're preparing for season 2, when we went quiet for 2 months, the Made in Uganda team kept on saying, "You know what, Jason, what's happening? We're supposed to be doing this. We have this huge vision to do." So he kept on holding me accountable, bringing me back to this. So, and another thing is that when you start something and you gain a following, Made in Uganda, we started our first session and we were able to attract certain people. So when we went silent, we actually had our customers, coming back and being like, "Okay, guys, what happened? You've left us out to dry. What's happening? Why aren't you doing this?" So I would say you really need partners to hold you accountable. You need a support system. And discipline is something that you build over time.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Weber Raymond from Entebbe. And if you've noticed, most of the youths that appear successful, they have a very strong digital presence or online presence. But then most of the people or youths don't know how to use these different social media platforms. So I want to ask that, how can we educate the youth on how to use social media so that they can put out their talents and show what they have? Because as you can see the trend, that's how social media and online presence is a very strong factor in determining one's success. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for that question. So what's social media currently? Social media is a tool that we have to show ourselves to the world. It's a way for us to show ourselves, or different presentations of ourselves to the world. And what you should know is that success is relative to different individuals. What you may consider successful may not be. We should use social media for currently is it is a way to show the world our personal brand. You get how we want the world to perceive us. So we're creating our personal brands on social media. And something my mom always tells me is that the internet never forgets. What you did 15 years ago, the internet will remember today. So it never forgets. So you really need to be cautious about how you put yourself out in social media and how you express your brand in social media. What you say about yourself, what you put out there, and just basically always add value to people. In whatever way you can be teaching people how to do makeup, as long as you're adding value. So add value to people through using your social media. Use your social media as a gift and also be social. Just be intentional with whatever you do on social media. Yes, and remember, it's a tool. And since it's a tool, you have the power over it. It does not have the power over you. You control social media. Social media does not control you. So you can switch, you can turn it off when you feel like it's too much, it's influencing your decisions too much. Take a break, take a 1 week break, and you can switch it back on. But just remember, it is your tool. You have control over it. So that's all I have to say on the issue of social media.
Yeah, you partly answered the question, but like professionally bringing ourselves out, I want more of that perspective.
So professionally, I would say one of the things that you can do is, how do you want to express yourself professionally? Like what exactly do you want to do with social media? Do you want to use it to start a business? Do you want to use it to reach out to some of these
something of a sort?
people? So what you do is that you leverage your following. With social media, you have very many people who look at what you do, and you need to find people who actually care about what you're doing on social media. Because some of the content that you put out there, some of the products that you put out there, not everyone is going to care about that. So you need to identify your target markets, who cares about what I say, who cares about my product, and then you find a way to target them.
Yeah, so Hakim, you had something to say?
Yes, thank you, Angel. I just had a question for Jason about, as young people, we tend to be faced with so many distractions. We have assignments, we have social lives, and then we have this big idea of trying to change the world. How do you execute that balance, in your day-to-day life? When you're going astray, what brings you back into line? Yeah, that's my question for Jason.
So one of the things that you need to notice is, yes, you have all these distractions, but you also have 24 hours in that day. So with those 24 hours, 8 hours are for sleeping. You spend about 8 hours in school. I can do that whole hour breakdown, but the truth is, from what I've learned, it all comes to this. It comes to what you do with your small pockets of time. The small amount, those small things that you do. For example, my story, I really like to gain a lot of my time instead of sharing knowledge. As I'm having my lunch, I normally like to watch something to keep my mind engaged so that I'm not just eating. So into university, I would watch Netflix. Every time I sit down to have lunch in my room, I would watch something on Netflix. Then I noticed that 1 hour, that 2 hours of my day that I spend on Netflix during my lunch time, plus the other 2 hours that I spend when I'm winding down, takes about 4 hours of my day. So during my lunchtime, I can sit down and watch Vusi, because Vusi Tembekwa is my role model. So I watch something on Vusi's YouTube channel as I'm having lunch. So what you do with those small pockets of time is really important. And most of these things, you realize that most of these things that take up most of our time, like this assignment, these school assignments that have been stressing you for a long time, they just need about 20, 30 minutes, less than an hour to do. But the hardest part is starting. So there's this rule that you can have of like touch hand once. So you have an assignment from school, get back home, get that out of the way, move on to the next thing. So that way you always have like your table and your schedule cleared. You touch hand once. I have this thing to do. I do it, get it done. Another thing that I found working for me is a calendar. I put, like, normally what I have to do on meetings, I put it into my calendar, and I get these automatic reminders. So it feels like the burden of reminding myself that I have to do certain things from me. Now, how I handle distractions is that I remember that I need to take things in moderation. From social media to Netflix, I noticed that when I spend time off social media, there's a way my mind starts to pick up new ideas. The idea for this youth session came when I took a 2-week break from social media. So I just give my mind space to breathe from these distractions. You know what? You just say, I'm having a lazy day, I'm doing nothing. I'm going to be bored, I'm just going to relax. Remove all the distractions and see how your mind interacts with that.
So it's been lovely having you, Jason.
Thank you.
And I hope to see all of you tomorrow.
Yes.